Okay, so this program is called How to Recycle Right. My name is Karen Maynard. I'm the Public Education Supervisor for the Solid Waste District and Metro Public Works Solid Waste Division. So, and I wanted to introduce my coworker, Diane Moon, is also a panelist, so she's gonna help me out. Sorry, I'm seeing the chat. I can't get your audio. Is anyone else having trouble with that? Send me a message because I don't want to go too far if there's an audio problem on everyone's end. I see Connie's having trouble there. Okay, so that may have something to do with your computer, Connie. I'm not sure. There is, I think at the top, maybe like an audio setting. You might try changing that. Okay, so I will go ahead and move along here. Diane Moon is going to help as a panelist, so she can also see the chat and maybe help if things come up. Okay, so at the beginning of every presentation I do, a lot of it has to do with recycling, of course, but I always like to remind everyone of the phrase reduce, reuse, recycle, and that reduce is always first. So that diagram there kind of helps us see the hierarchy. Reducing is the most important and trying not to have trash in the first place. And then when you do, reusing if you can, or at the last resort is recycle it if you can. So, so we will go over a lot of recycling information, but keep in mind that we do encourage you to try not to have a whole lot of trash to begin with. Now, this part gets a little confusing, and actually we're going to have a webinar in a few weeks that will address this a little more in detail for Louisville. It's our curbside collection is a little different depending on where you live. So if you've moved around before in Louisville, you may know that, and it can seem very confusing. So we are going to devote a webinar to that collection system and why it's different depending on where you live and what options you may have. So so I briefly have to touch on it with this. For recycling. So if you're within the old city limits, or we call it the urban services district, you may have the city waste collection. So those carts, the orange lid and black cart there and the orange bin are options you have for recycling within that area, and that's paid for through your property taxes. You might live outside of that area. You may live in a small city like St. Matthews or something, and they contract for you. So you pay for it by the idea that you live there. Or you might live in what we call the unincorporated area, and you have to subscribe to your trash service separately. So you may or may not choose to subscribe to recycling. It's always, it has to be offered to you, but you don't actually have to take them up on it. And if you don't have curbside recycling, everyone does have the option to recycle at our drop-off locations. We have a map on the Public Works website of where those are all located, and that's a picture on the top right there of what it would look like. That one, I think, is the Fairdale location. So it's just a dumpster, and it collects the same recycling that you would if you had a bin or a cart, and you can just drop it into those dumpsters. And then there's some items that are recyclable, but maybe not through your regular curbside or drop-off program for just the regular recyclables. But we do have an electronics recycling program and a paint recycling program. It has been on hold due to COVID-19, but that's just some examples of things that can be recycled, but maybe not in a traditional way. All right, so when through everything I do, I get a lot of the same kinds of questions about recycling. And so to understand some of those details, like what can I recycle, or, things like, well, what do I do with the lids or the labels, or do I have to clean it, or why are the rules different? So all of those things I think you can help understand the answers to those questions better if we actually go over more about where the recycling material goes, how it's sorted and processed. And I'm going to go through that with you guys so that hopefully you'll get to a point where you can answer some of those questions on your own based on what you know about the process. So the question of where is it processed, this is anywhere you are, if there's a recycling program, that material is going to go to what they call a material recovery facility. And it's in Louisville, we have one facility, and it is called West Rock Recycling. So if you've heard me on Nextdoor or Facebook or anything talk about recycling, you've probably heard me mention West Rock. And that facility is where all the recycling is taken to be sorted and processed, except if you have Rumpke as your hauler, because Rumpke actually is based in Cincinnati, and they have their own big materials recovery facility there in Cincinnati. And so recycling goes there to be sorted and processed. And that's important to know because every facility actually has different equipment. They have different markets of where the material can be sold. So because of that, they have different rules. And although it does make it confusing, just kind of understanding that concept will help you realize why maybe some jurisdiction allows certain recyclables and some don't. And here in Louisville, it gets a little confusing because usually I have to, I kind of need to know if you have Rumpke or not, because they have a little bit different of accepted items lists. So, but nonetheless, every materials recovery facility has some kind of equipment for sorting and processing the material. And the next, I also, before I move on, want to mention that if you've moved from somewhere besides Louisville and you can't figure out why the rules are different, this is why. Every facility is different. So everything I say in this presentation is for Louisville. If you come across this and you don't live here, then you may have different rules. So just keep that in mind and always follow local instructions. That also goes for anyone here that decides just to Google the question of, can I recycle this? That's not always going to give you the right answer because you're going to just come across any kind of website all across the country with different answers. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to find things out a little bit better. The next series of slides are going to be short video clips. They will repeat. There's no sound on the videos. I'm just going to talk about them as they go. So this is actually what they may call the tipping floor at West Rock here in Louisville. It's off Fern Valley Road. And that basically, if you see at the beginning of the clip, there's a little truck, a blue, I think it's a Republic truck that happened to be dumping some material in the pile. And then this scooper is moving the material to start it into this sorting process. And this is a video clip of some staff at West Rock, and they are pulling items off of that conveyor belt. So kind of before it comes to them, that's basically, it's coming from that scooper, and it just has a turning mechanism to kind of get things shuffled out so it's not all stuck together. But if you look on that conveyor at what they're pulling off, you would notice that it's mostly plastic bags. And we'll get into some of the things that aren't accepted. But their job right there is to get things off of that conveyor that they don't want to move forward into the machines. So it doesn't mean that the things they pull off are all going to go straight to the trash. They do try to recover as much as they can, but not everything that comes through that line can get recovered. This is where it goes after it passes them by. And this is basically a screen or filter that is getting the cardboard separated first. So Heavy items are falling through, smaller items. The cardboard kind of rides on top of that. So further along the line, there's another spot where there's people still helping to sort and pull things off that don't belong. But by the end of that conveyor area, the cardboard falls down to the bottom there. So some trucks only bring cardboard and it doesn't have to go through the process. They can just dump it right there near this pile. So eventually there's just a lot of cardboard and they'll just push that all together and bale that all up. And I have a note here. They actually process about 10,000 tons of cardboard per month there. So cardboard's their big thing there. Now, some of the other material that moved along gets sorted differently. So this spot is actually an eddy current. And if you kind of look into the black space there, you might see some of the aluminum cans are basically being repelled and kind of jumping. So they are jumping here. So if you, in this case, you can kind of see the opposite side where they're falling. So that's the mechanism to get aluminum separated from everything else. All right, so, and then of course you can already see some bales right in the foreground there of aluminum. So once, like with the cardboard, once the material is in the one type, like aluminum or cardboard, that's whenever it gets sent through the bales to, and that's the product. All right, this is just another conveyor that kind of shows some of the material. It's kind of a bumpy conveyor belt. So some of those two-dimensional paper and things will ride up while some of the three-dimensional objects will fall down. Just another mechanism to sort things out. And this is a baler. So I think looks like cardboard's coming out there. It's wrapped in wire and they will continue to whatever it is they're working with, whether it's the mixed paper, the plastic, it gets into these big blocks and they will load it onto a train or truck to be delivered to whoever their buyer is. So the bales there, that's basically their product that they're selling. And so, you know, if some people are concerned about where, especially our plastic goes, WestRock does not ship anything overseas. So it's kind of going somewhere in our region to be made into something new at that point. And I do have a list of some of the places where the material goes. And for example, Kimberly Clark in Owensboro, Kentucky will make bath and facial tissue, cartons, paper towels out of paper that we recycle. I'll talk about WestRock again in a minute, but a paper mill owned by WestRock makes cereal boxes and newspaper. The plastic actually goes to another facility for further sorting into the different types of plastic, but carpeting, clothing, and more plastic bottles and plastic pellets are made. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. If you have more questions specifically about that, I can answer those. Okay, so for your purposes of being a recycler, you want to know what's accepted, how can I do this right? I want to make sure I don't mess anything up. This is our flyer for recycling. So if you aren't, I'm assuming since you're taking a webinar on it, maybe you do want to know more details, but if you are the type of person that just wants the basic info, this flyer is for you. And if it's pictured on there, recycle it. If it's not pictured on there, then don't recycle it. So it lists some examples as well and gives a little bit of info on what's not accepted. There is some fine print under one section of plastic and then the metal, just to refer to the fact that Rumpke does not take everything on here. So specifically, Rumpke does not as far as plastic, they only want bottles and jugs. So that's kind of like that left section of plastic. And they're not going to accept any of the other things on the right. So that's that's probably the biggest difference between the two. They don't accept aluminum pans either. So, which, since it's in the picture, I put that on there as kind of a disclaimer. And all right, so that's basically the general idea. Now let's get into a little bit more detail. So I get a lot of questions about plastic. Unfortunately, every plastic container has this recycling symbol with a number on the bottom. The recycling symbol throws people off because it makes you think automatically, oh, I must be able to recycle it. There are some areas that only accept certain numbers, maybe just ones and twos or something like that. So basically, for us, West Rock accepts all the numbers. It goes till 7. So those are you might see 1 through 7. And they accept all of them. There are some exceptions to that rule, though. So that's why make sure you look at that picture on the flyer so you kind of get an idea. And as far as Rumpke is concerned, and maybe some other facilities around the country, they may not go by the number at all. Sometimes they talk about shape instead. So for Rumpke, it's bottles and jugs only. They want the opening of the bottle or jug to be smaller than the base. And that's how they describe what they accept, rather than talking about numbers at all. So it can get confusing, but if you basically remember that, again, if you have Rumpke, you do have to kind of follow that separate rule. But if you don't, then all the numbers are accepted. And here's some extra little things here. Styrofoam does have a number 6 on the bottom because it is polystyrene. That's the type of plastic it is. So that's one where you don't want to just look at the number and say, oh, I can recycle it. That's one of our exceptions. And so I have kind of a list here of a few reasons why something might be an exception that we don't take. One is the market. So just in general, if a facility can't find a place for the material to be sent and bought, then they might decide they don't want to start accepting it, or they might need to discontinue that. You may have, in the past couple of years, there have been some facilities that have to change what they accept. Let's see. I was seeing a question that I'll go ahead and address here from someone. Does the city keep information on the proportions of each material recycled, beneficially reused, or incinerated, or dumped into the landfill? Is this a factor in deciding which MRF to contract with? Well, yes, we do have information. We basically have to do a waste audit, which can be quite expensive. So we have done one big waste audit, and that was the information from that was released in 2018, and it's on our website. I can send that link out. It's a big document. And then, as far as which MRF to contract with, since we really only have, we have one local, that may be a factor because you have to consider cost of travel and things. But yes, there are lots of things that we're going to go to. Right now, we just renewed our contract with West Rock recently, so I think we'll have that for a while. Okay, so back to the exceptions. So the markets, like I said, if a facility doesn't have anywhere to send the material, then they wouldn't want to keep taking it. They would have to store it until maybe they can find a market, things like that. So that might be a reason why a place doesn't accept things. It could have to do with safety, because now that you've seen that it's handled, people do have to kind of pull and touch and move some of this material by hand. So that could be a reason. There are some things that we like to call tanglers. If you can see that picture on the left, I happened to be at West Rock one day whenever the machines had been shut down. And they were in there cutting out some of the material that had gotten wrapped up into those gears that turn. So plastic bags are a problem that do get caught up in those gears. That's one reason why we wouldn't want those plastic bags. And also, people might try to recycle cords or wire and things. If you just kind of think, oh, it's metal wire, you should be able to recycle that. It's metal. But kind of understanding that this is all mixed up. So it has to go through this process to get it sorted. And if it's going through the process, it's going to hit these machines, and it might actually be harmful to the machines and cause shutdowns, things like that. The motor oil bottle I have there in the picture because that's considered a hazardous waste. You can't really clean that out too well. So things like containers that had material like that, you would want to just throw that in the trash. It's not exactly something that they're going to want at the facility because it can be harmful to the people that work there and also the rest of the material. The styrofoam containers, that's the last bullet that I have there that says cost effective. I kind of put that there to remind myself to tell you all styrofoam is a type of plastic, but it's been kind of puffed out. It's mostly air. So if you don't have the equipment to densify that material, then if you need to ship that somewhere to get it densified, so it's back into its original form, you're basically moving air. So it's just not really cost effective to move it around. So, it's some places that accept it. It's probably because they have that equipment to actually densify that material. Now, we do have a facility in New Albany called Foam Fabricators that makes styrofoam products. So they will accept some those styrofoam inserts. Maybe if you bought a big TV or something and it came with a big block of styrofoam, you can drop it off there. That information's on our website. During their business hours, you can take it. Otherwise, it would just have to go in the trash. Other things that people often like to ask are about lids and labels and things like that. Should we leave them on? So for labels, you generally can just leave them on. It's not a big deal if you take it off. But if you don't, that's okay too. So in some cases, that material, once it's all baled together and it gets to the manufacturer where they're going to melt it down or whatever they're going to do with it, that extra little bit of material is just sort of going to get flushed out during that process. So whether it's a label or maybe a window envelope with a little bit of plastic, something like that, it's okay. And we do ask that you leave plastic lids on. That one's one of those rules that's changed over time. So if you learned it one way, it might be different than what you thought. We really would ask that you scrunch the container if you can, squeeze the air out and put the lid back on for plastic containers. So that way it is probably going to stay on if it's, because when it gets baled, it gets pushed. So the lid might come off if it isn't scrunched already. And lids like glass jars with a metal lid or maybe a glass bottle that has a plastic lid, you can go ahead and separate those for us because they would be able to be recycled separately. And they aren't going to have time on that sorting line to be separating things like that. So another question people often have is whether or not they should clean the material. I usually tell people that the cleaning's probably more for you. We ask, in our facility, asks that the material is empty. If you want to clean it, go ahead, especially if you're trying to keep your own collection containers clean, keep odors out, keep pests out, especially in the summer, totally fine. Not necessarily, you don't have to run all your recyclables through the dishwasher or something like that. That peanut butter jar in the picture is clean enough for recycling. You've scraped out as much as you can where you don't feel like you're wasting any food. All right. I also, on that note, with the peanut butter jar there, that was one of those things where sometimes you want to balance the rules with, like, you don't want to, there's some people, if you say you had to clean recyclables, they might think that it was too much trouble and just give up and not recycle at all. So we kind of have to balance a little bit on what we ask of people, because we don't want to turn people off to the program at all. Now, this is a question, this came up actually yesterday in my No Waste Wednesday, pizza boxes. People always have heard not to recycle pizza boxes. My contact at West Rock and I always joke that we want to know who started that campaign, because we think we would want to hire them to help spread messages, because everybody thinks that. This is an interesting thing that I've been telling people who've asked me that the last couple days about pizza boxes, is that West Rock Recycling owns our materials recovery facility, or MRF, and they also own several paper mills throughout the US, and they manufacture most of the pizza boxes that are used in the United States. So they want that cardboard back, and they, like I said, bring in, what was it, 10,000 tons of cardboard per month. So there's so much cardboard coming in that's not pizza boxes that it doesn't, a little bit of grease, like in this picture, doesn't actually ruin their material. So that's, through conversations with my contact there at West Rock, that's what she has said, is that the grease isn't a big deal. Now, you don't want to leave a bunch of crusts and peppers and butter containers and things like that in there. Take all of the stuff out, but you can recycle those pizza boxes. And if you really are concerned about cheese or something stuck to the bottom, you can always just rip off the part that you think is too soiled. But it is kind of neat to be a part of a closed loop system that we have West Rock that makes so much cardboard as well. All right. Another general rule that we see it a lot. If you know the rule, you probably notice too, if you go around on recycle day in your neighborhood, a lot of people still like to bag their recyclables. Different reasons for this. I know some people still use an 18-gallon bin and they don't want litter. Of course, we don't want things to blow out of the bin, but there's other options besides bags. So we're trying to keep the bags out of that facility, because that's what they're having to pull off of that sorting line. So hopefully you have a chance that you're able to recycle your items loose. And the only exception to that is shredded paper. So if you really want to recycle shredded paper, you can, but it does need to be in a clear bag so they can see that it is shredded paper, and they'll pull that off and capture that separately. But if it's just loose in your container, it will go everywhere. Which leads me to another photo that I took at the recycling facility. And this was on the floor. Took a picture of the floor where it looked like someone had kind of push broomed some things over. So you can see, there is some paper shreds there, a lot of lids, some straws. I see a playing card, just some little things, even just one random piece of paper there. So there are some differences between some terms here. So I like to say there's a difference between recyclable and recoverable. So we might say, well, yeah, plastic caps and plastic straws and lids, they are recyclable. They're made of a material that's very recyclable. But the way the process works and how things are sorted through those big machines, they're not always recovered. So this is a pile that's not going to be gone through. It's going to be scooped up, and they do have some residue that's taken to the landfill. So it didn't hurt anything to try, but some things just don't make it. And so that's kind of an important thing to understand. So a lot of times when people ask if something is recyclable, I do like to use the term accepted a lot too, because some facility, like we mentioned before, might accept some items that we don't accept. And it doesn't mean it's not recyclable. It just means that they can't either find a market for it, or they can't sort it out, or get it to get captured through their screens. So it just depends. I think that was it on that. Now, I do want to also mention our Recycle Coach app. So if you don't have that already, please download the app on a smartphone, or you can use it on our website, louisvilleky.gov/recyclecoach, and you can find it. We do just have it there on our website. But one of the best parts about it is the what goes where search tool. So you just type in anything and you can find out the best way to dispose of that. And that information is specific to Louisville. If it's through a drop-off program, there will be a link to an address, and you can pull that address right up on your phone. And if it's recyclable, it might give you some more information about how to prepare it. But, you know, or if it's not, or if it just says to put it in the trash, just put it in the trash. Not everything can be recycled. So when you have a product and you're bummed that you can't recycle it, just try to find a way to not have that product again. You know, use up what you have, but maybe you don't want to purchase that again. So the other reason to use Recycle Coach, if you do have city waste collection, you can get reminders on your phone for any waste collection service. You can see a calendar. But I also put events on there. So even if you live outside of that service area, you may not be able to see your waste collection schedule, but you can see other events that I add, whether it's a drop-off event, if we have a shredding event or something like that, it'll be on that calendar. And even these webinars, I put them on the calendar, and you can see that, click, and it has the link to register. So it's a very valuable tool, and we want more people to use it. So at this point, if you guys have specific questions, this is a good time. I do have a little bit of a chat window showing, so I might see some questions here come up. Like I said, still trying to kind of figure out how to use this platform, so I haven't noticed anyone raising their hand. I know Connie was having some trouble with audio, so I hope you got that figured out. So I'll just wait a few minutes if you have any questions. I'll be sending out some information, or I have, I'm able to send emails to you guys, so I can send some links if anything, like the link to the waste study, like someone mentioned. While we wait, I also, hold on. So our waste district, that's kind of where we have the no waste phrase. So the district, I educate for the whole county. So No Waste Lou, you can follow us. I have Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube right now, and then our website. And let me see. Is Louisville committed to single stream recycling, or have you considered other options? I'm pretty sure we're going to be with single stream recycling. The only option that I know of, and maybe you are referring to, is dual stream, where maybe you separate paper and containers or something like that. It is sometimes considered better, but for us, the capital cost to get other containers, other trucks that would do that, I don't think that that's something that's really being looked at as an option. So we'll probably be sticking with the single stream recycling for now. If you go to one of our drop-off locations that has staff there, we actually do source separate a lot of that material, and we get some rebates on that, which is good. That's run by our waste district. But all the other self-service dumpsters around town, that's going to be just single stream everything together. Good question. I don't see any other questions coming through, but I can wait a few minutes and hope that you guys also register for the future webinars that we have coming up. So it's 5 Thursdays in a row. We'll be here at 3 o'clock. Next week, we're going to talk about composting, and Diane Moon's going to talk about vermicomposting that she's recently started. So we'll give some basic guidelines, but also some experience that we have from our own compost bins. All right, I don't think I had any other questions come through. Thank you all for coming. I'll stay on here just in case, but we'll go ahead and consider that the end. So thanks for joining us for our first No Waste webinar.